Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Sushma Talegaonkar from Department of Pharmaceutics, Jamia Hamdard. Today we are going to discuss about the module Pharmaceutical Evaluation of Parenterals from the paper Pharmaceutical and Biological Evaluation. So after completing this module, you shall be able to understand what is the parenteral dosage form, what are the various types of the parenteral dosage forms existing in the pharma industry, then what is the formulation consideration for the parenteral dosage form, means what are the various excipient which we generally use in the preparation, and the last one, but one of the most important thing which is the focus of the today's module is evaluation of the parenterals. The parenteral dosage forms. Before starting the evaluation of the parenteral dosage form, first we should know what is the parenteral dosage form. So the parenteral dosage form, in a simple language we can say the parenteral dosage form other than the oral is called the parenteral. So long back in 50 years back, only the two dosage forms they were existing, oral or the parenteral, and later on maybe the topical. So the parenteral dosage form, they are the sterile preparations intended to be administered directly into the systemic circulation by injection, infusion and implantation to exert their desired therapeutic action. It denotes the route of administration other than the oral route. Now, the parenteral dosage form, in another word we can say, when the oral route is failed, when we cannot use the oral route for any particular medicine, in that case we usually prefer the parenteral dosage form. So parenteral dosage form can be administered by the various routes, but basically the main routes are intravenous, subcutaneous, intradermal, intraperitoneal, intraspinal, intracardial, epidural, etc. Advantages of parenteral dosage form. It provides quick and rapid onset of action. They also provide the immediate therapeutic action. They can be administered in accurate dose, can be used in emergencies. They also eliminate the first pass metabolism. They are suitable for the drugs which are unstable in GI tract and not absorbed orally. They also ensures the maximum bioavailability. Now the disadvantages of parenteral dosage form, they should be administered aseptically. They produce pain at site of injection. The administration of the drug through the wrong route may prove fatal effect. Self-administration is not possible if pyrogenic preparations lead to very harmful effect. Now, formulation consideration of parenteral dosage form. First, we are going to discuss what are the excipient we used in parenteral dosage form before starting the evaluation of the parenteral dosage form. So, first is the vehicle. Vehicle plays a very important role in parenteral dosage form, and the vehicle, they are divided into the aqueous and the non-aqueous vehicles. Aqueous vehicle, they basically contain the water, and especially the water for injection, WFI, and generally water for injection prepared by the distillation and the reverse osmosis. The diagram is showing the distillation plant and the reverse osmosis for making this water for injection. Another vehicle is water miscible vehicle. They are PEG, that is a polyethylene glycol, ethanol. They can also be used as a vehicle in parenteral dosage form, and they are very good solvent for antibiotic, glycosides and barbiturates. Second category under the vehicle, they are non-aqueous vehicles. They are also known as water immiscible vehicles. Under the non-aqueous vehicles, the fixed oils like the peanut, corn oil, sesame oil, olive oil, basically used to dissolve the hormones like progesterone, deoxycorticosterone and some vitamins like vitamin K preparations. Other than the vehicles, some other materials we usually add during the preparation of parenteral dosage form, they are called the additives or the added substances. And under the added substances, there are the various categories. Like the first is the solubilizer, like ethanol is a very popular solvent. Chelating agent, EGTA, that is one of the most commonly used excipient in pharma industry. Antimicrobial agents like the phenol and the cresol. Hydrolysis inhibitor, surfactants are the best example. Antioxidant, they are the butyl hydroxytoluene BHT and the BHA. Buffering agent like the acetate and the citrate buffers. Tonicity contributor, they are the sodium chloride is the best tonicity modifier. Sometimes we can use the glucose also. And another category is the cryoprotectant and the lyoprotectant. Examples, they are the mannitol and the this trehalose, and inert gas, nitrogen and the carbon dioxide. Now, after the composition of the parental, just take a look what are the different types of the parenterals. The parenterals, they are mainly divided into the following categories. First, injections. Second, infusions. Third one is powders for injections. Fourth one is implants. And last one is the concentrated solutions for injections. Now, first, injections. They include sterile solutions, emulsions and suspensions. The type of injections, first is single dose preparation and another one is the multi-dose preparations. Like some examples of marketed preparation, like the Enbrel, Myoblock, that is a small volume parenterals, SVP. Another one is the Tegamet, that is a multi-dose and the single dose vials. Now, another type of parenteral preparation is infusions. The infusions are defined as the sterile aqueous solutions or emulsions with water as the continuous phase free from the pyrogen. Example under this infusion, they are the Perazil intravenous and FI mole. Another type of parenteral, that is the powders for injection. The powders for injections are defined as the sterile solid substance including the freeze-dried materials which are meant to be shaken with the prescribed volume of soluble sterile liquid to form the clear solution or uniform suspension before the injection. Marketed preparation for this powders for injection, very popular example is Doxil, which is a freeze-dried liposomal preparation. Donozone, that is also a freeze-dried liposome powder, which has to be reconstituted before the injection. Then the Pacliol is another, this albumin coated or albumin conjugated paclitaxel preparation, Nanoxil and the Botox. Now, another category of the under the parenteral dosage form is the implants. They are also the injectable dosage form in which the implant, they are generally administered in any body cavity or beneath the skin. So, implants are defined as the sterile solid preparation of the suitable size and the shape for implantation into the body tissue for releasing the active ingredient over the extended period of time. Basically, we are generally formulated in the form of very thin films and a very small size, and there is a one needle. With the help of that implanter, we can introduce that implant into the body cavity or beneath the skin or any other body tissue. So marketed preparation is the Glidel, Duros, Durin and the Zoladex. And the last one is the concentrated solutions for injection. They are meant to be administered by injection or by the intravenous infusion only after the dilution with the suitable liquid. The examples under this heading, they are the magnesium sulfate heptahydrate 50% solution manufactured by the Febra. Now, the evaluation of the parenteral dosage form. So, under the evaluation of the parenteral dosage form, we will see what are the various tests which we generally use for the evaluation of the parenteral dosage form. So, first one is very important, that is sterility testing. Second is the pyrogen testing. Third one is the leakage testing or the leaker testing. Next one is the uniformity of the content. Then the uniformity of the weight, especially in injectables when they are in the dry powder state. Then the particulate matter evaluation, that is also known as a clarity test. Then the labeling and the packaging testing. Now, first test, that is the sterility testing, which is one of the most important tests under the parenteral dosage form, because we all know the parenteral dosage forms, they are the sterile preparation. So, in order to determine whether they are sterile or not, we have to perform the sterility testing. And by this test, we generally get to know whether the prepared formulation is sterile or non-sterile, and depending on this test we can go further for the evaluation, or we have to stop this evaluation here, and again we have to reformulate other and we have to relocate any mistake we have done during the processing and all. So the sterility testing, basically the test is applied to the substances or the preparation which according to the pharmacopoeia they are required to be sterile. So, however, a satisfactory result only indicate that no contaminating microorganism has been found in the sample examined in the conditions of the test. Now, for the sterility testing, the two important media they are required. The first one is fluid thioglycolate media, and another one is the soybean casein digest medium. After selection of the media, we will see what are the various methods by which we can determine the sterility testing. So there are the two popular methods for sterility testing. Method A, that is a membrane filtration method, and we also we can say that is an indirect method, and method B, that is a direct inoculation method by which we can determine the sterility of the given formulation. Membrane filtration, this is the one technique by which we can determine the sterility of the prepared formulation. So in this technique, the membrane filtration is generally used whenever the nature of the product permits, that is for the filtrable aqueous preparation, for the alcoholic or oily preparations, and for the preparations miscible with or soluble in aqueous or oily solvents, provided these solvents they do not have an antimicrobial effect in the condition of the test. This is the diagram of the membrane filtration. The diagram is showing there is a membrane filter on a filter support, and the water sample or a sample which is for the sterility testing is generally filtered through the membrane filter. The size of the membrane filter is 0.45 micrometer. Then after membrane filtration, this membrane filter is generally removed and placed in a plate containing the appropriate medium. Then after putting in the medium, the incubation is generally done for 24 hours. After 24 hours, the typical colonies are going to be formed if the preparation or the water is not properly sterile, or if the preparation containing some bacteria or some contamination. So definitely we can see a particular growth of the bacteria or the bacterial colony after the 24 hours. And this growth of the bacteria or the finding this bacterial colony shows the preparation or any formulation is properly sterile, and the test is going to be failed, and preparation is again further has to be sterilized, and again we can use for a sterility testing. Now the method of testing for membrane filtration method. So as we already discussed, the membrane filtration method is also known as an indirect method for sterility testing. So here in each membrane was prepared aseptically. A small quantity of the fluid A, that is also we can say as a test material, maybe suspension, emulsion, simple solution, for which we want to conduct the sterility testing. So the testing material has to transferred onto the membrane and then filtered. The membrane size usually 0.45 micron size membrane we usually use. The liquid was drawn rapidly through the filter with the aid of vacuum. After filtration, the membranes were removed aseptically and transferred or cut aseptically into the two equal parts and were transferred in the two suitable media. The conclusion of this test is that when we put this membrane into the media, we have to observe at least for 1 week. We have to store, we have to observe for 1 week, and if we see the growth or the bacterial colony or any turbidity in media, then it indicates the membrane is containing bacteria, and the bacteria usually comes from the formulation which we have filtered through this membrane. So the conclusion is that the test is considered to be satisfactory or passed when no contaminating microorganism has been found in the sample, or in another word we can say no turbidity has been appeared in the media, and media is totally clear and examined in the condition of the test. So basically if the turbidity appears, we can say the test is failed, because turbidity is usually indication of the bacterial growth. And if the end of the test the media is totally clear, then we can say the formulation is sterile, there is no growth we have observed, no turbidity we have observed, and the formulation is completely sterile preparation, and we can go for the further evaluation. Another method for the sterility testing is the direct inoculation. In this method, the sample which has to be tested for the sterility testing, we are directly going to be inoculate in a media. So the sample is directly inoculated in the media or a culture media and observed for a period of incubation of 14 days. So this diagram is showing how we are going to do the direct inoculation. So we are generally going to take the two test tubes. One test tube is the control, another test tube is generally for the sample preparation or for the test sample. In both the test tube there is a media. Now in one test tube we are not putting any formulation, but in the second tube we are generally directly inoculating the formulation which is we want for the sterility testing. After putting the sample in the media, we are going to shake the test tube for a few minutes so the sample is properly mixed with the media, and then we can incubate it for 30 to 35 degree temperature at least for 1 day, and maximum not less than for the 7 days. So maximum sterility testing time is 14 days, but we can observe after the 1 week also. If we are not finding any growth, we can further keeping it in the incubator for the next 1 week. And after 14 days, if we are finding the growth or the turbidity inside the test tube, that shows the formulation is containing some bacteria or some contamination, or the formulation is not properly prepared. So again the test is showing the negative test, or the test is going to be failed, and we have to repeat the test. And again if it is showing a turbidity or the growth, it means the whole formulation has to be discarded, and we have to make a fresh formulation with the proper precautions. The method of testing for direct inoculation method. Under this method, the contents from the test container were removed with a sterile pipette, syringe or the needle. Adequate quantity of the test preparation was transferred directly into the prescribed volume of the culture media, and it is generally in this inoculated media was incubated for not less than 14 days to observe any growth of the bacteria. So the conclusion of this test is that the test is considered to be passed when we do not observe any growth in the media. The product to be examined complies with the test for the sterility if no evidences of the microbial growth is found. If evidence of the microbial growth is found, the product to be examined does not comply with the test for the sterility, unless it can be clearly demonstrated that the test was invalid for the causes unrelated to the product to be examined. Now, the next test is after the sterility testing, the next test is the pyrogen testing. It is again one of the most important tests in parenteral dosage form. So, pyrogen testing, as we all know, the pyrogen is generally considered to increase the temperature. When they are injected into the body, any living body, they will rise the temperature. So, if we are administering the formulation to any living organism, especially rabbit is generally used in this test, and if the temperature is going to rise, that shows that formulation is containing the bacteria, and that's why the temperature or a fever, in another word we can say, the fever is going to occur in that animal. So the pyrogen test is generally designed to limit the risk of febrile reaction following the parenteral administration of the drugs. It includes both in vitro and in vivo test. So the pyrogen testing is generally done by two methods. First method is in vitro testing or the LAL test, and second one is known as the in vivo test, because some animals, they are generally used in this particular test, and that's why it is called the rabbit test. Now the first one is the in vitro test or the LAL test. It is also known as an Limulus amoebocyte lysate test or in vitro test. It is generally used to detect the presence of concentration of the bacterial endotoxin in drugs and the biological products or any pharmaceutical formulation. The lysate-derived amoebocytes of the horseshoe crab, Limulus polyphemus, is used in this test. The Limulus polyphemus is horseshoe crab. Limulus is genera of crab. Amoebocyte Crab blood cells from which the active component is derived. Lysate means the component is obtained by separating the amoebocytes from plasma and then lysing them. The hearts of the mature crab is punctured and bled to collecting the circulating amoebocyte blood cells. The pyrogen testing is another evaluation parameter of the parental dosage form. This pyrogen testing is usually divided into the two parts. In this slide, we are going to discuss the LAL test. LAL test is also known as a Limulus amoebocyte lysate test, or it also known as an in vitro test. LAL reagent reacts with the bacterial endotoxin or lipopolysaccharide, which is a membrane component of the gram-negative bacteria, and forms the gel, which is then used for the detection and quantification of the bacterial endotoxin. Lysate-derived amoebocytes of the horseshoe crab, Limulus, this polyphemus, is used in this particular test. The reaction is very simple. We are taking the sample, and in the sample we are adding a specified quantity of the LAL test. We have to dissolve that LAL reagent in the sample, and then we can incubate it for 37-degree temperature for 1 hour. After 1 hour, the gel formation is going to be occur, and this indicates the presence of endotoxin from the gram-negative bacteria. Now the limitation of the LAL test. First, disturbed by the endotoxin binding components like the lipids, blood component. Second limitation is the difficulty to correlate with the rabbit test, that is an in vivo test. And third one is false positive for cellulose and many herbal preparations. Now the second test under the pyrogen testing is in vivo test, or the rabbit test, or the sham test. The test involves the measurement of the rise in body temperature of the rabbits following the intravenous injection of sterile solution or any pharmaceutical preparation or any sterile substances being examined. It is intended to be used for the liquid products that can be tolerated by the test rabbits in a dose of 10 ml per kg. Injected intravenously, generally within a period of not more than 4 minutes. For the products that require the preliminary preparation or are subject to the special conditions of administration, the additional directions given to the monograph should be followed. The conclusion of this test is that the sample passes the test for pyrogen if the temperature of 3 individual rabbits is not more than 0.6 degrees centigrade. If the test fails, that means that then repeat the test with the additional 5 rabbits. The temperature of the group of 8 rabbits should not be more than 1.4 degree centigrade. So generally the test, we consider the test is passed when out of the 6, the 3 individual rabbits should not show the rise in the temperature more than 0.6 degree. And if they show rise in the temperature, then we have to take this experiment another for the 8 additional 5 rabbits, and again we have to perform the whole procedure. Liquor test. This is another test for evaluation of parental preparation. The test is determined by dipping the preparation in 1% methylene blue dye solution, and pressure of 25 inches vacuum is applied for nearly 15 minutes. The vacuum on the tank is then released as rapidly as possible to put the maximum stress on weak seal. Conclusion. Defective ampules will contain the blue solution that indicates there is some leakage through which the methylene blue going inside the ampule, and the test is going to be failed. The content uniformity test for parental dosage form. Again, it is one of the most important tests in especially in the pharma industry. So content uniformity test usually shows or give the indication how much amount of the drug is present in the formulation after storage. The sample under the investigation complies with the test if the individual value of 10 containers obtained are all in the range of 85 and 115% of the average value. if the one individual value is outside the range of 85 to 115%, but within the range of 75 to 125% of the average value, repeat the procedure by randomly taking the another 20 containers. The sample under the investigation complies with the test if the total sample of 30 containers, means in previous case we have taken 10 and then second we have taken 20. So overall the total sample of 30 containers, not more than one individual value is outside the range 85 to 115%, and none is outside the limit of 75 to 125% of the average value. Uniformity of weight. This is another important parameter for evaluation of the parenteral preparation. This determination is specific for powders for injection. The difference between the weights before and after emptying represent the contents weight. The average weight of the containers selected at random is determined. Not more than two of the individual weights deviate from the average weight by more than 10% and none deviates by more than 20%, then the test is considered to be passed. Clarity test. The clarity test is also known as the particulate material or particulate matter test. In this test, we usually find any particulate material is present in the preparation or not, because the parenteral preparation, they should be considered or they should be free from the particulate material. So the test is very, very important. If the particulate material is present and if we are injecting to any patient, the patient is going to be die. So the particle should not be present in the parenteral preparation. There are some methods for determination of the particulate material present in the parenteral preparation. The first one is the light obscuration particle count test. This is an electronic instrument of high intensity light beam is used for measuring and counting the size of the particles. So the diagram is showing a high intensity light is going to be passed through the cell in which the preparation is going to be tested, and some light is going to be reflected on the detector, and the detector is showing whether the particles are present or suspended in the formulation or not. If no sensitivity showing by the detector, it shows the preparation is free from any particulate material and the test is passed. This is the second method for the counting the particulate material present in parenteral preparation. The another method is the microscopic particle count test. This method utilizes a microscope and oblique light at 100 magnification, which enables the counting of particles on the surface of the filter. The measured sample solution should be filtered through a membrane filter under ultra clean condition. Now the acceptance criteria for the particulate matter. As per the United States Pharmacopoeia, the large volume parenterals, the limit is not more than 50 particles per ml, the size is 10 or more than 10 micrometer, and 5 particles per ml, size more than 25 micrometer. This is the limit or acceptance criteria for particulate material. And small volume parenterals, for that small volume parenterals, the 10,000 particles per container of size 10 micrometer or greater and not more than 1000 particles per container greater than 25 micrometer. Labeling and packaging is another criteria for evaluation of the parenteral dosage form. For single dose containers, the specified volume is limited to 1 liter and is administered at one time. Single dose containers are specifically used for parenteral administration by intraspinal, peridural or intracisternal routes. For multiple dose containers, the volume of injection should not be more than 30 ml. Injections used as irrigations are packaged in containers of more than 1 liter. Veterinary injections are exempted for the requirement of packaging and storage. The labels on the container of parenteral products must state the name of the preparation, the amount of the drug contained, the route of administration, expiry date and storage conditions, name of manufacturer and name of distributor, and the last one is the identifying lot number. This is a typical label for parenteral preparation, and the example we have taken the caffeine citrate injection, United States Pharmacopoeia, 60 mg per 3 ml vial is there, and this is for intravenous use only, and the sterile non-pyrogenic preservative free, and for single use only, discard unused portion. So the student, let us summarize what we have learned from this module. So the first, parenteral drug delivery is useful when the other routes of administration are not possible because of its rapid therapeutic action, its effectiveness, its suitability for all type of the drug. Then we have also discussed about the evaluation of the parenteral dosage form, and pharmaceutical evaluation is very critical and most important part of the quality control. And the test of evaluation for the parenteral dosage form, they are very specific and have its own significance. The test ensures that the product is sterile and exhibits the all quality characteristics, which is very, very important before releasing the product into the market. Thank you.